Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Authentic Podcast with Justin Doulard. And thank you for tuning in to another episode. It's time!
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning back in to the Authentic Podcast. It is Wednesday, February 10th, and I have who I believe probably my most unique guest to the date. So extremely unique at that. She is a celebrity psychic who has been featured by Will Ferrell's Ron Burgundy podcast, BuzzFeed, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, and many, many other media outlets. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Miss Laura Powers. Laura, thank you for coming on, and how are you doing?
I'm doing amazing. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. So hope you're staying warm. And like I said, I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I told you before I had a lot of engagement on my Facebook Q&A. I had probably 15 to 20 questions asked from people. And I'm sure some of those will get covered in general talk, but I did write them down because some of them are specific. So I guess we'll dive right into it. So
that sounds great.
I'm extremely intrigued by you. You were one of the rare people that asked kind of to come to me. We're in the podcast group, and you said, "Hey, I might be someone good to come on your show." Normally, I have to reach out to everyone else. So I was like, "Okay, who is this?" Looked it up, and I knew this would be a good conversation. So I guess the first question I have, which is probably the most general one, is how did you even become or figure out that you were a psychic/medium? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think it happens differently for people with these abilities. But in my case, I was very much like the kid in The Sixth Sense, if you've ever seen that movie, Haley Joel Osment character, where I saw spirits that looked like solid people to me. So in fact, it was sometimes difficult for me to tell who is a live person and who is the spirit. And I would do things like think there was an intruder in the house and I call the cops and it's a ghost. I mean, it was really confusing and sometimes embarrassing for me. And I grew up just thinking maybe I was crazy and just trying not to talk about it. I learned to observe other people, like what did they see and sense? Did it seem like something someone else was seeing or not? And if it wasn't, then I just didn't bring it up. And fast forward many years, and as I got older, my abilities got stronger, which I think happens a lot for those who have a soul path or purpose in this work. So it was like I couldn't really ignore it super well. And then I had a life-changing moment where a family friend described a ghost that I'd seen but never told anyone about. So that was the moment that I knew I wasn't crazy. Like, you can't see a hallucination of mine, and then it's not a hallucination. But I still didn't really know what to do about it. I didn't have psychic teachers in my life at the time. And so I tried to block it all out. And I was fairly successful in the sense that I stopped seeing and sensing a lot of the things that were there. But basically, I blocked out everything. And fast forward many years, and I was in a bad place in my life. I was physically sick. I was unemployed. I was in a bad marriage. And this all came to a head for me during the recession. And I went to a psychic just to try to get guidance to figure out what the heck to do with my life. And she basically, without me saying anything that I just told you, told me how when I shut out my abilities, I shut out my intuition and I needed to open back up. And she told me about angels. So I learned to invite angels into my life, and my life completely transformed. I went from a pretty hopelessly, bad seeming situation to changing my life, turning it around very, very quickly, and started taking psychic training classes just to manage my life, and very quickly realized that this was a part of what I was meant to do for work. So just to give people some context, I was working in government and politics before this. So it was a pretty big transition to go from, government to psychic work. But here I am. It's now my main profession. I have a healthy business that I've been growing for years, and have several books on, various psychic topics. I have a podcast, Healing Powers podcast, where we dig into all of this stuff, and love what I do. And I'm very passionate about helping people understand the psychic realm, because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about it that I'd like to get clarified and educate the public on.
Yeah, I agree. Gosh, so many questions. One to start with. So you said as a child, you would see ghosts that it was hard to differentiate them between real people?
Sometimes, yeah, not always, but sometimes it was clear they weren't, and not just ghosts, but also other non-human entities, basically things in the non-physical realm, I would see.
Does that still occur now, or you typically see you can tell a difference, or sometimes those kind of blend?
I can generally tell the difference, yes, with experience and also just being able to better sense the different energy frequencies. So a ghost typically has a very specific kind of energy frequency. And I've just learned to kind of tap into that and like feel the difference between a solid person and a not solid or not alive person. But yeah, it's complex. And this is a lot of what I do for my work is people hire me. I do mediumship, so communicating with spirits on the other side. And then I've also done paranormal investigation work and ghost whispering, where you communicate specifically with earthbound spirits or ghosts.
So I have plenty of friends and family that, have always told me for years that they've seen ghosts, or they've seen relatives that have passed as ghosts, and that, it makes them happy sometimes. And sometimes they can kind of feel that sensation that they're around. I've never felt that. Is there a common reason that there are certain people who see ghosts and spirits and some that don't?
Well, I think it's just like anything. There are some people that have more natural abilities or inclinations with certain things they can do or not to. So for example, some children that immediately obviously have like strong athletic ability or strong music ability or, art ability. But that said, we also don't really learn about how to access all of this when we're young. So, if we had like Psychic 101 training when we were little kids, could be a very different world right now. So frequently when I teach, because I teach these classes, psychic development classes, and it's pretty common that there's someone in there who's just kind of curious and they just want to explore. And then we start digging into some of the exercises and they're really, really psychic. So, there's different ways that it can manifest. So for example, you could be clairvoyant, which is when you see. So I'm a clairvoyant. So it's pretty clear I'm seeing something, right? But if you're empathic, where you feel energy in your body, or if you have psychometry, where you get information through touch, or you're telepathic, where you get information through thoughts, you may or may not automatically recognize that it's a psychic ability that you're experiencing. Whereas with the clairvoyant aspect, which is means seeing, like it was pretty clear something was happening. Now, I thought I was crazy for a while, but then once I understood about these abilities and got confirmation, I realized it was a psychic ability. But some people need training to understand what they're experiencing, what is a psychic ability that they have.
Thank you. I want to kind of start some of the Q&A that I had, kind of pepper them in the conversation, so I don't
Sure.
Just drill you with 21 questions at the end. But so does everybody have a spirit guide, or only certain people have spirit guides?
So yes, everyone has angels and spirit guides. In a very few rare circumstances, someone will say like, hey, I don't want angels assigned to me. So we're probably heard of that idea of a guardian angel, so we have those. And then in addition to that, we have other spirit guides typically that also help us. So you can think of them as like a sort of spirit team that are there to help you guide and navigate and support you in your incarnation. So yes, everyone does, but a lot of people don't feel that connection because they don't know about it and they don't know how to access them.
I have someone who listens quite a bit that they have been to a meeting before, and their spirit guide had a name. Does your spirit guide have a name?
Yeah, well, I have many guides. So one of my main guides is Archangel Michael, who's also an angel. So there are non-angel spirit guides as well, but angels can also act as guides for us. And this is a guide that from the somewhat young, I could feel a connection with the angels. And by the way, our names often have meaning for us. So my middle name is Michelle, which is the female version of Michael. But I knew something was up when I was at a museum, and it's the Isabella Gardner Stewart Museum in Boston, and it was like across the room, and I saw this giant painting, and I was like, I know that guy, except as I got closer, it was a painting from, I think, the 1500s, and it's like an angel, it's Archangel Michael, and I was like, it was the weirdest thing. It was like this, like, I know this person, and then I walked up and I was like, oh, that makes no sense at all, so sometimes we'll have these little inklings or connections, but a lot of times, most people, they really don't have any sense of that, but everyone does have an angel and then also other spirit guides that may also be assigned. And yes, you can learn, you can connect their name, you can ask for, specific help from them. And that's a wonderful thing to do.
Is that person or spirit guide ever a friend or family member that has passed? or is it always somebody kind of, a third party per se?
Yeah, so I think our loved ones who have crossed over to the other side can act as like a guardian angel in a way, or a spirit guide, but they're not typically like the ones that we're talking about where they're assigned to us, early on. But they do love us very much and will obviously care for us and what happens with us, and will often act out on our behalf on the spiritual side or in the spiritual realm as well. And, we feel the loss so much when someone passes away, but usually they feel really connected with us still. They'll still kind of come and visit us. They'll be around us. They'll, know what's going on, even if we don't sense that they are.
Thank you. I was going to ask, because it's in your pitch line too, and I did listen to it, the Ron Burgundy podcast. I was going to kind of talk about that and just have general conversation, because how did you get connected with Will Ferrell, I guess, and what's Will like outside of character?
Really nice guy from my experience. I mean, it was I was there for the day of the recording, and that was it. So it's not like I had a lot of time before and after. But one of the things I teach is manifesting. So I think we have the ability to call in different things and opportunities. And I had definitely been asking my angels and spirit guides for help with kind of bigger media. And I've had a lot of, wonderful opportunities. And so they basically just invited me to be on the show. So they found me. I asked the producer about their process. She said, I spent several hours on your website, which I was like, several hours, that's a lot. And then they reached out and invited me on the show. So they were specifically looking for a psychic. So, there are certain shows where they don't really accept pitches. And that would be, I think, one of those shows where, if you get invited, you get invited. And then there are some shows where you can pitch.
Very nice. Soulmates. Can you explain those? Are soulmates real, and how do those work? And I was also going to ask, can a soulmate be not a partner? Can that be a friend as well?
Yeah, we have a lot of different soul relationships. And I think the idea of a soulmate is often misunderstood. And I think it's frequently used to describe someone that we have a very strong soul connection to. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a romantic connection. And sometimes people feel that someone's a soulmate when it's really more of like someone in your soul circle or soul family. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're meant to be a mate with that person. It can, but not necessarily. So I've seen a lot of people say, he's my soulmate. And I'm like, this is a very dysfunctional relationship and you're being guided to step away from this person, So I just feel to say that because it can be, credible, but also sometimes we connect with different souls to help learn very difficult situations. And sometimes we may be very close to someone on a soul level, but they may still be providing a lot of challenge for us in terms of our lessons. So we can be close to a soul, and that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for us.
You said whenever you were younger, you saw and experienced these things, and then for a brief period of your life, you basically turned it off, or kind of, put it on the back burner and took a different path. But then you said you weren't doing very well overall with your health and whatnot.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you, now that you've taken on this full time and you found your calling and you do it as a livelihood, are you able to turn that off? I guess for your own clarity. It was a question that I had, and someone had kind of asked, how do you set boundaries and protect yourself while you're practicing?
Sure. So yeah, and to be specific, I turned off my abilities, generally speaking, for about 10 years. I mean, it took a while for me to get so kind of off. But yeah, I don't recommend it. If you have these abilities and you shut it off, you're basically also shutting off your navigation system. You're shutting off your ability to tell what's going to help you, what's going to be not helpful. So I really recommend for anyone who has these abilities to tap in, and even anyone who doesn't feel that they do, to just learn about it, because it can be helpful. But yeah, right now I wouldn't say that I ever turn it off because I want to know if something's important. But when I'm working, I really am fully focused on. It's kind of like, running full speed or something. Like you can't do it all the time, right? So I really focus on purely the psychic realm when I'm working, and then when I'm not working, it's still somewhat on, but it's kind of like I'm more walking versus running all the time, if that makes sense. Like, and then obviously I sleep and rest and whatnot. So yeah, it's just a matter of how much I use it at a given time, and then also a matter of setting up energetic and spiritual boundaries. So when I was young, one of the reasons I had such a hard time, and I was always seeing ghosts, and non-physical beings like this was because I didn't know how to set up spiritual boundaries. And we're not really taught that. Like, physically, we're like, we learn, don't touch me if I don't know you. We, don't touch my body. We learn, you have a house, you have a door on the house, you have a lock on the door. These are things we do to protect ourselves physically, but we really need to learn how to do that energetically and spiritually, especially if we have these abilities, because we'll attract different beings. So I had to learn how to do that. So now that I know how to protect my space, it's a lot easier for me to kind of let my guard down in a way, because I know I'm in a safe space when I'm not working.
If I was going to seek someone's services, a medium or a psychic, obviously if it was not you, what are some things to be leery of? And then, how do I spot someone who is pulling my leg, not a real psychic medium? I guess, this whole world is new to me per se. Are there a lot of people out there taking advantage of people, or is that, kind of rare? And if so, how do you spot, or typically how would you try to weed out somebody who is not legitimate?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of people that are either not legitimate or just maybe not that great. So I definitely recommend for people to do research on a psychic. Check out their website. I recommend going to someone who has a website. Check out their reviews if they have them. See what other people have to say, and also, word of mouth. So checking with people in your circle, do they have someone they've been to? Asking them about that is great. And just a word of caution in terms of some storefront psychics, not all, but some of them, and by the way, I'm saying, meaning like, a psychic that literally has a physical location, and they often will have like the palm reading sign or the aura sign or something, that the sort of neon sign. That's just a sort of stereotype. And this always confused me, because I frequently would walk by some of these places and just feel like horrible energy. And I also realized like there weren't many people there, but it'd be like really expensive real estate. So always something was kind of like strange about that. And then when I was researching a new credit card processor, they basically said, we can't cover you because you're a psychic. And when I asked them about that, they said, but some storefront psychics are actually fronts for money laundering.
Oh, wow,
So
okay.
because it can be a cash business, it's a way that they try to legitimize, mob money basically. So anyway, just something to be aware of. I think it's good to use your own intuition in terms of who to go to. Do some research, check out website if they have one, check out reviews, ask people for referrals. So in my case, I do get a lot of referrals. I get a lot of repeat clients, and I get, someone will come to me and then they'll refer a bunch of people to me. So that's very frequently what ends up happening. So yeah, do your diligence basically. And there is a reason for caution in this area.
So if I go to a shop downtown, I might be dealing with the mob or something?
Again, I'm not saying any particular shop or location. I'm just saying that this is something that was told to me, that this can happen.
Interesting.
So,
I'm sure that happens with other businesses too. So
I did briefly have had 2 storefront locations briefly, but for the most of my time in my career in this work, I've been online or over the phone or kind of mobile in terms of my location. And most of the legitimate psychics that I know operate that way as well. And now during the pandemic, it's like, great, you can, set up, we can Zoom just like we're doing now, or just via phone as well.
Yeah. So the pandemic didn't really hurt you much then, because you've been doing that for quite some time.
Yeah, I've been primarily online for about 5 years, but yeah, actually this is, in terms of business, I was very busy this year. I think a lot of people were looking for guidance, and I also teach podcasting. So I really felt to do that more now, with just everyone suddenly being home and trying to figure out, how to do things differently. So between those 2 reasons, it's been quite a busy year for me.
Yeah. At the end of this, I was going to have you talk more on your books and your podcast and whatnot. And I always include the links to my guests, to their shows and their stuff and that. So I'll be sure and do that. But
Right.
I think this is another big question, at least for where I'm from. How does religion conflict with, psychic medium realms? I know in some religions, it's not necessarily looked as a good thing, but I know there are some people, including my friends who I had asked for good questions, that, they believe in both. They are, pretty big Christians, but they also believe in the psychic medium realm, but it's not really looked upon positively. in like the traditional church setting, at least for a lot of them. So that, that may
Yeah.
not be popular everywhere. I am from Oklahoma, so it's, the Bible Belt per se, but, is there any confliction there? Do you come across that problem quite a bit?
I mean, certainly there's lots of different religions all over the world, and some have, discussions about this type of ability and work, and some don't. So I was raised Catholic. So, I mean, there's a lot of discussions and kind of a lot of almost magical stuff talked about in Catholicism, maybe more so than, Christianity or some branches of Christianity. But, one thing I want to say that I think is in a lot of these various religions is angels. So angels are described in Christianity, they're described in Islam, they're described in Judaism, and angel-like beings are described in cultures all over the world. So that is, one of the things that I think ties a lot of these different religions together. The way I feel about religion is I think that some of them have a lot to offer. From my perspective as a psychic, there isn't one religion that I feel like kind of really works in terms of the whole system for me. So I think of myself and describe myself as spiritual versus religious, but I do understand why people like religion, and I think that there are some wonderful things that they can have to offer. I encourage everyone to be open-minded, because all religions are essentially described and structured by humans. So you look at Catholicism, and that's what I have the most personal experience with, since my family is Catholic. And you look at the Bible. Well, the Bible was put together by men, and what we call the Bible was revised and changed over various periods in time. So, for example, the Roman Emperor Constantine at one point pulled out several parts of the Bible that had references to reincarnation. So there used to be references to reincarnation in the Bible, because if you can reincarnate, then, there came up questions like, why do you need the church, or why do you need last rites, or why do you need all these things from the church? So I just encourage people to do research about it, and just know that inherently, these religions have been created, and that's not to say there isn't spiritual truth in them, but a lot of the things that people tend to argue and differentiate with different religions, has to do with languaging and some things that were literally created by men, and typically like hundreds or thousands of years ago. And, we've changed a lot as a culture. And, another thing that happened, like in the Bible specifically, in the Catholic Bible, is that there were followers of Jesus who were female, whose names were changed to male names in order to be more in line with the times, so there's been a lot of changes. It's not like this was originally the word from God, and then, it was literally the culture of the time has really informed and structured how these religions were, in many cases, created and taught to others.
I listened to several of your shows, one of them being the Ron Burgundy one, but the other one, I don't remember the woman's name you were with, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that you believe that everyone has been something else in the past life. Like, we've already participated in reincarnation. Is that, did I remember that correctly?
Yeah, that's my general understanding. There may be some very few exceptions, but generally, if we're here as a human in this particular time in society, we've incarnated before.
So I'm Native American, not a lot, but I am. But my great grandmother was a full-blood Native American, and an old Indian tale, or Indian tales that some Indians say, is that Native Americans could be shapeshifters, which is they, could go to an animal, like present day. Have you ever heard of anything like that, or is that off the wall to you?
Oh, not at all. No, I do believe that that's possible. And absolutely. And someone who's psychic, I see things that other people don't see, both physically and spiritually. And I absolutely believe that that's possible. There's a book I write about this called Supernatural Survival Guide, where I talk about, kind of supernatural beings and different types and, what they do. So I do talk about shapeshifters in there. And I think there are actually different types of shapeshifters. So I think there are human lineage people that could shapeshift. And I think there's types that are not human, but can appear human through shapeshifting as well. Many different dimensions. I think we're living in an extra dimensional situation here, where we have the earth plane. So we have extraterrestrials. I'm sure everyone's heard that term, where you're in this plane, but from a different location. And then there's other dimensions. So you can be an extra dimensional being from another Terra as well. So you can be an extraterrestrial, extra dimensional being. But, you know, this, what we view as reality, I think most people tend to think of it as very solid and very simple. And in my perspective, it's very complex, actually. And when you start to open up to this stuff, it can be pretty wild, because I have seen and experienced beings I'm like, that is not a human. That looks human. You know, everyone assumes this person's a human. That is not a human.
You've seen people you thought was not a human.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how to respond to that. Like, so obviously they're not an alien, but you know, there's something else.
Oh, they could be. Yeah. No, they could be. Yeah. Again, what we define as an alien, there's extraterrestrials and there's extra dimensional beings. So beings that are from a different dimension, but can come into our dimension. So I believe that, yes, that is possible. Both are possible. And I think a lot of times people are talking about extra dimensional beings, or they're thinking it's an extraterrestrial being, but it's really an extra dimensional being.
I'm such a kid at heart, and I think about funny things all the time. But as soon as you said that, I instantly thought of like Will Smith and Men in Black.
I believe that there's a lot happening that we are not told about. And as soon as I started opening to the psychic realm, I started to have these experiences of things that, like, wow, this isn't what we're being told in terms of what's going on. And that's not my area of focus. Like, I tend to focus on angels, you know, and my work with humans. But no, there's a lot more going on than what we're told. And in terms of the media, I do think that there's a lot that gets kind of, you know, not told to us in terms of the mainstream. So I've participated and gone to conferences and events where these kinds of things are discussed. And for example, you know, there'll be a conference where they're talking about exopolitics. Exopolitics is the term for, you know, the interrelation between humans and non-humans, so extraterrestrials, basically. And either they'll have a conference and they'll have senators speaking there, or, you know, government officials who are talking about their experience with flying saucers. And then the picture that they put in the newspaper is literally the person with like a tinfoil hat on, you know, like that's how it's presented in the media, probably because it sells as well. But there are, if you look at, there's lots of documentations of, you know, official people in government who have come out to talk about some, you know, different things that they've witnessed and stated. You know, you look at, obviously Roswell is one of the most famous examples. Like, there's definitely some unusual things happening there, things that don't really quite add up. So I just I encourage everyone to sort of question the narrative and just not assume that whatever we've been told is the case.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go to Roswell just to drive. You know, I know it's kind of a touristy spot now, but I've always wanted to go check it out. My wife's been and said is you know, kind of corny now with all the stuff, but I always thought it would be neat. But I feel like a lot of people listen to Joe Rogan. I don't know if you do, but you know, probably about a dozen episodes ago, he had a gentleman on named Travis Walton, who I guess, you know, I was born in 1990. So I guess in the 70s, he was, you know, supposedly abducted by aliens. Mm-hmm. And, you know, his story, obviously some people think it's fake, but he talked about, he was with 5 to 7 coworkers, and they didn't particularly get along that well. So they didn't have a reason to all have the same story. And I guess the 5 guys he was working with, you know, saw him get abducted, and they thought they were lying, and they thought they had killed him. And he showed up 5 days later, you know, pretty disheveled. And yeah, that's an interesting one. You may enjoy that, but
I'll definitely check that out. I mean, there are a lot of reports of these kinds of things, and I will just say I've literally witnessed, you know, beings that I'm like, that looks human, but it's not a human. Like, I psychically do not feel human. They don't. No, I've had some unusual interactions. So it is believed that a lot of extraterrestrials are very telepathic. That's something that's discussed. And now there are different types of extraterrestrials. So not all of them are, but some of them are. So I've had, you know, some exchanges, some psychic exchanges with some of them. But in one case, there were these 2 men, and I'm putting that in quotes, that they were not following social norms. So I was at a nightclub in Los Angeles. This is when I was living there. And I was getting paid to do bottle services as a thing where they like cast people where you go and, like, you know, they'll pay to make it look like they have a bunch of people there dressed up nicely or whatever. So I was doing that. So I was in this bottle service area, and I noticed these 2 men right away. They were very tall. I'm talking like, you know, 6'8", like very, very tall, 2 men. And when I felt in them, so I'm an empath, which means I feel emotions and energy outside my body, in my body. And they literally had no emotion. Like I didn't feel anything from them. And so I noticed them right away because they were very tall and like very obviously stood out. And I noticed them and something was very strange about them. So they basically came up to the like place where I was doing the bottle service, and there was a rope separating it. And one of them leaned against my back. Now it was not crowded. He literally had to come up and lean against me in a non-crowded situation. Like that's not a normal thing to do. And I psychically said to him, back off. And I leaned forward, and he still stood there. And at this point, I'm like, this guy's not listening. So I went to the bathroom, and he and the other guy followed me down. So there were no words exchanged. This was all mentally. And then once again, I told them to back off, and they did eventually leave. But that's weird behavior. Like that's not something that a human would typically do without any kind of conversation happening.
Did you happen to ask anybody around? It was like, do you know who these guys are, or has anybody ever heard?
No, I mean, it was a big nightclub. Yeah, no. But that's just one example. And I've also literally seen UFOs, meaning like they can't be explained. And in one case, it was on the news, like a bunch of people. It wasn't just like me seeing it. It was like made the news of these lights that didn't behave in normal flight patterns. So it was like 3 lights that were red, and they in the sky made a line, and then they'd make a triangle, and then they'd make a line, and then they'd make a triangle. So that's just one example of one of the things that I've seen it was on the news because so many people saw it, and it's still unexplained.
It's 2021, so things are, people are learning more and being more open-minded, I feel like, than they ever have been in history. But how often do you get called crazy? How, is it, it started when you were younger, but are there people that still skeptics and doubters, or
of course,
rude to you at all?
No, I mean, if you look on online videos and things, of course, there's going to always be trolls and,
oh, yeah.
people that
That's
say crazy things. Online. But in terms of like my circle, no, I don't expect others to have the worldview that I do because they don't perceive the world that I do. They don't literally see what I see. They don't feel what I feel. So I'm not here to try to convince anyone what I believe. I do recommend being open-minded, and I encourage people not to just assume that whatever they've been told is correct, because true science is all about hypothesis, and then things that we've even thought were like a scientific fact or principle are deemed wrong like all the time. Like this is a part of the scientific process, is this exploration, putting something forward, and then we get new information, and then we have to come to a different conclusion. So I just encourage everyone to do that. And I actually do feel that I'm quite scientific, and that there's just a lot of these things we don't have ways to measure or understand these things yet, or at least that we know of. You look at government programs, and I have my podcast, Healing Powers podcast. I interviewed Russ Targ on my show. He was literally a spy, a psychic that was hired by the spy program during the Cold War to spy on the Russians as a psychic. Like this was a funded government program where they paid psychics to get information intelligence, basically. Russell Targ.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can listen to that episode on my podcast, Healing Powers podcast. He actually has a documentary about this. I think it's called Third Eye Spies. That is on, I believe, Amazon, maybe on other places as well. So you can listen to that. This is what happens, is like something is very secret and it's not, told to us, and then it comes out decades later. So we don't know what they're currently doing, but you can guarantee that whatever is currently being done is not being told to us right now. It'll come out a lot later, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. It's not like these things aren't happening. The other one, there's a movie that was made about this. What was it called? I think it was the Men Who Laugh at Goats or something. It was with George Clooney.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So that's a mainstream movie that was about one of these like wild programs that was funded by the military.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I do remember, hearing about that and seeing the title. It just sounded weird to me. It didn't sound interesting, but I may have to look into that. So yeah. But you're saying this gentleman that you had on, you were on his podcast or he was on yours?
No, he was on mine for his documentary. So he was one of these, government employees that was, secretly using psychic abilities to spy during the Cold War. So, I mean, this is definitely something that's happened. I mean, if the government is funding it, that's something to pay attention to. So but then again, I'm just saying, like, I know a lot of people will dismiss a lot of stuff. I'm like, there's a lot more going behind the scenes than what we're told or what we're taught. So just to, be aware, see what resonates for you. But I do think that a lot of younger people are more distrusting of, what we're told, and also more willing to make their own opinion. And a lot of opinions are changing in terms of about the, extraterrestrials. There was some kind of disclosure statement. I think it was maybe a few months ago where there was some kind of statement that the military said acknowledging some kind of extraterrestrial life. So, I mean, there's more and more of these kinds of things that will be coming out, I think, over time.
Do you have anybody that, like a bucket list, or like someone that you would, I guess, like dream of being their psychic or their medium, like whether that's a role model or a celebrity or somebody you're like, I want to get with this guy and see what he's all about? Is that how it works?
I mean, I'm pretty lucky. I've actually worked with a lot of celebrities, and many of them I can't say their names because I've signed non-disclosure agreements. But I've worked with big stars, movie stars, television stars, household names. So I mean, I love working with nice celebrities. I want to put that out there. Those that are nice and friendly.
Have you had some bad encounters?
I've been pretty lucky. I mean, I've just like anyone, I've had some strange encounters with, just people in the public as a whole. Like I said, you'll get the comments on, some of my videos, BuzzFeed or whatever. You get all kinds of people responding to that. But in terms of the people that I've worked with, I've been, very blessed and lucky. So, yeah.
How did you become so successful in that, especially in the, the celebrity world? Like, I obviously know that, you're an entrepreneur, and so that was probably a huge part of it. But, how did you differentiate yourself and get these big time clients?
So I think that's a complex question. One of them is I worked hard, and it's not about, just putting the time or something, but literally I took a lot of classes. I really worked at my skills and my abilities. So I think that's important, whatever you're doing. I took it seriously. Like I did, I signed up for training, and I, treated it as a business. There's a lot of people that kind of dabble in this work. And then I held my value. I think this is an important thing in anytime someone is an entrepreneur, or anytime someone's doing something that's maybe a little bit out of the box, and certainly for creatives, it's important to honor your value. And if you don't honor your value, then the universe reciprocates in kind. So the analogy I like to give people is the universe is very much like a Netflix queue. If you watch Netflix, there's this algorithm, and whatever you engage with, whatever you watch, it shows you more of that. So in terms of your life, what are you saying yes to? What are you inviting more of to come to you? So if you connect with people that don't appreciate you, don't want to pay your fees, don't, value what you offer, or if you don't value yourself, then you're going to get people connecting with you that feel the same. So I think that's one of the first things you can do is really teach others and teach the universe how you want to be treated. And if something isn't feeling good or isn't lining up for you, say no, walk away, and don't allow that to come in for yourself. So for me, it's been a process of continuing to put out my work, taking it seriously, valuing those that are connecting with me, and then just, having high standards for myself and for others in terms of my work.
As far as children and young adults, is that rough to connect with those in the spirit world, to relay those for people, young adults, or maybe children who are not
those who have passed? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think so much of it depends on the circumstances of someone's death. Generally speaking, spirits are usually in a good place when they're on the other side. I think what's hardest for me is honestly not the spirit, but the loved ones who are still here, and the challenges or struggles that they may be going through if they've lost someone. I had one day, this was kind of early on in my career, and I had two mothers whose sons had committed suicide, and that was a heavy day, to put it mildly. I have so much compassion for those mothers and everything that they're going through. So days like that, when I'm dealing with really tough emotional situations, obviously that's challenging because I feel what's going on with them. I have empathy for what they've gone through. But those spirits who are in the light, meaning they've fully crossed over, they're on heaven or whatever you want to call it, they're in a wonderful place, and they are usually trying to help their loved ones here more than anything.
This may be an ignorant question, and I'm not sure. If it is, then don't hold it against me. But I have to ask about Ouija boards because
Yes.
there's these, you see everything in the movies and these misconceptions and stereotypes. Are these things just a junk board game, or do they really, mingle with spirits? I'm a believer that they don't, because you could, buy them at Walmart for $20, but people think differently. So
Yeah, I would be very cautious with Ouija boards. I don't recommend using them if you don't have training. And even with training, I think it can still be dangerous. So that's my perspective on Ouija boards. I personally know several individuals who have just been messing around as children and called in something really unpleasant that they then had to deal with, and in some
seriously,
cases struggled with for years. Yeah. So yeah, I don't recommend it. I don't think it should be marketed as a children's toy. I think it's actually quite dangerous to market it that way, because it, without being handled properly and without protections, it's like an open doorway to the spiritual realm without any protections in place. You know, I just don't think it's a good idea. Some people like to play with it, think it's fun. If you feel to do that, I definitely recommend asking angels to protect the channel, because otherwise it's basically saying like, hey, come and talk to me, whoever. I mean, you just don't
well,
know. You don't know
okay,
who's going to
so
answer.
I mean, I don't know. I made a guess, and I thought you would say that they're just kind of a bogus toy. So the fact that you
Absolutely
said
not.
the
No,
fact that you said that,
I literally think it's just, you know, it could be dangerous. I'll just say that.
so how, so like I've never bought one, never played one really, but you go to Walmart and there's 200 board games, and then there's one right there, like you said, marketed to children. It's like ages 8 plus to an adult. How does something like that with so much potential sit next to Yahtzee and Monopoly and Connect Four or something? I mean, it's right there.
I think it's being, you know, that company and or any company really is there, it's a company designed to make sales. I think it does have an appeal. So on a business level, I understand it being sold. I think a lot of the people who buy it and potentially even those who made it, I don't know the story, so this is not about any particular company, but they may not believe anything of this either, you know? So
Good
it all
point.
depends on your perspective on it.
Wow. I did not expect that answer, but that's good. I appreciate that. So,
I just encourage anyone who's doing any kind of messing with the spiritual realm to get educated, to pay attention to what's going on, to use their intuition, to ask for protection. So the other thing that people will sometimes get into trouble with is paranormal investigation. So there's all these paranormal investigation shows. You can, you know, Ghost Adventures and whatnot. These are all just many different types of shows where they Ghost Hunters International, etc. And this is not about those shows. It's more just if you are going to try some of what they show on those shows, just know that you could potentially interact with some intense energy beings. And if you don't know how to handle that, you know, you could be left dealing with a tough situation as a result. So I've done a lot of paranormal investigation, but I also know how to protect myself. I know how to clear whatever I experience and not bring it home with me, not take on that spirit or that being kind of on the rest of my journey.
are there any like areas or cities that are more spiritual than others or more spiritually prone? So, maybe some that wouldn't be so stereotypical, like for example, like New Orleans, supposed to be like a voodoo town. Is that just kind of the touristy culture thing, or is there really pretty spiritually there? I've been several
You can
times.
like cut the supernatural energy with a knife in New Orleans. It is
Really?
incredibly supernatural. Absolutely. I mean, these cities that have that reputation, there's generally a reason for that. So I almost moved to New Orleans. I've actually spent quite a bit of time there, have a lot of clients in New Orleans and Louisiana as a whole. Um, you know, there's a reason that it's such a part of their culture, because I think the energy is very strong there for this type of work. So yeah, New Orleans is very strong. I mean, it's interesting. You look at Los Angeles, that, you know, the city literally means angels. You know, I mean, it's interesting. So there is a lot of angelic energy there, but there's also, you know, the light in a way can attract the darkness as well. So there can be a lot of darkness there as well. But yeah, there's a lot of places in the South, a lot of places where there's been intense things that have happened, wars, battles, you know, slavery.
Like
There's more
major
likely to
historical
be
events?
supernatural energy. Exactly. And burial grounds, that can be the case as well. So I mean, here in the United States, there's a lot of pockets of, you know, intense energies and supernatural energy from various things that have happened here. And then some of it also has to just do with the land. and what's going on with the land as well. So ley lines, nature spirits, and whatnot.
Yeah, like I said, back where, I'm from Oklahoma, Indian Territory is can be known for, Native American land being very, very, very spiritual,
Right.
and people seeing wild and good things out there at times. So, and kind of like you mentioned with other things, not to really delve and mess around in there unless you're ready to see or hear
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, be cautious and also respectful. I mean, you know, checking in intuitively and seeing like, is this even a place I should be? Is this there's actually a movie you might find interesting. It's on, I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's something adventure, but it takes place in Hawaii, and there's this whole plot point in there about the native Hawaiian spirits protecting the burial grounds. It's really interesting. Like, we just, as American culture, we're just like, yep, whatever, just bulldoze it. We don't care, like it's money, and I just think, well, you may then have some challenges on that property if you're not honoring what's there or listening to whether this is even something that should be developed.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. We're close to our time limit, so I won't keep you too much longer. It's been a great conversation. Was going to ask a few more questions and then we can wrap up. I noticed on your, this is kind of off key because do you ever get tired of talking about this stuff at all? Do you ever turn off and just want to talk about other things, like other hobbies and interests? Or,
I mean, I love this kind of stuff, so I love talking about it, but I also love a lot of other things. I mean, I'm a songwriter. I love, creativity in films and travel. And so, I mean, I do love talking about this, but it's not, for me, it's not just all about that. I love,
Sure.
other things as well. But I think this stuff is fascinating, and I love talking about it to share it with others and hopefully just get a conversation going. Again, I'm not trying to convince people something, but just even if you start to just think about things in a different way, and it's amazing how sometimes when you start to open your mind to some of these things, you may have an experience or witness something that you can't explain either.
I guess, just for the average person that just has a traditional job, you probably not, people don't sit there and pick your brain about work 24/7. So I didn't know if that's something that you're ever like, dude, can I get a break? Like, I don't want to read your mind right now, or I don't want to feel your energy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are times when, I remember one time I was staying at a hotel in Los Angeles. This is before I moved there. And I basically ended up like teaching a class in the lobby because I started talking to someone, and it's like more and more people came in, and I was like, because they were just curious. And so I do have to be aware of my energy boundaries, but something like this where, that's the purpose, to educate, share, and inform, then I'm happy to do that. But that's also one of the reasons why I started to write books. So I have 8 books. My last one is on podcasting, and then 7 books are on the spiritual realm. So that's a great way to learn more about all these things if you're curious. And to me, I don't really differentiate between the sort of psychic spiritual realm and kind of business or work. Like, a lot of my clients are actually business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, and I'm using my abilities to help them in their work. So just something to keep in mind. We don't have to have like, here's my life, here's my work, here's the psychic realm, here's our health. Everything to me is a lot more connected.
Yeah. So you do a lot of things, and you are an entrepreneur, an author, sing and do all this. I did see on your website that you take cryptocurrency as payment. So, are you kind of a small time investor? And the reason I just brought that up is because I think 3 or 4 episodes ago, I had a gentleman who I'm friends with who is a crypto consultant and really big into it. And it's just kind of a hot topic right now. So.
Yeah, I actually started learning about cryptocurrency several years ago, and I had a couple of clients that they were hedge fund managers and had made a large amount of money through crypto like early on. So I knew that this was a thing to learn about. I would say I dabble in cryptocurrency. I'm not like, one of those like hardcore people that, does a lot in that world, but I think it's worthwhile. And I think it's also going to be more and more important in the future. So I think it's important for us to have at least a base understanding of it if we want to kind of keep up with what's happening.
I'm sure you saw Tesla bought 1.5 billion Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, I own Doge. I bought Doge a while ago. So I was like, yeah, it's like my Doge has gone up like about 3,000% since I bought it.
Oh wow, yeah. So I have a lot of buddies who own it, and we talked about that honestly quite a bit on that podcast. Because I had a buddy post about it, and I thought it was a joke. I didn't know because it
started out as a joke coin. I mean, it started out literally as a joke. So
I have some friends who've made, quite a bit of money relatively considering the investment. So That's pretty
I mean, that's
interesting.
that's the thing. If you get on one of these coins at the right time, you literally could make so much money with such a small amount of, dollar investment. Um, so I think it's worthwhile. It'll be curious to see. I do think that there's still going to be more growth in the crypto market as a whole. So I definitely encourage everyone to start to educate themselves on it, because whatever timeline that's going to be, and I think it's going to continue to be important in our society, and not just cryptocurrency, but literally blockchain technology, which is what cryptocurrency is based on, is going to be more and more important. So we need to know about it.
Yeah, this is probably a dumb question, so don't hold it against me. But do you have the potential to see things before they happen that far in advance?
Definitely.
Like, could you give me a decent example?
The more, this is what I'll say, the more people are involved in something, the harder it is to predict an outcome. That is because we all have free will. So we're constantly making choices. So all of our choices influence an outcome. So anytime you're looking at something with like lots of people, it's harder and harder to predict what's going to happen. So I do a lot of work with people where they're looking at, manifesting, trying to create their futures that they would like. And I give them guidance, but as a psychic, I get bits and pieces. I don't always get the whole entire picture. I get whatever my angels and spirit guides and that person's angels and spirit guide relay to me. So I'll share an example. I can talk about this because this client has talked about it publicly. So
okay,
it's already out there. But I had a client, she and her family had wanted to move to Hawaii. They were based in Los Angeles. And the first time I met them in a reading, I said, you're gonna move to Hawaii. And she said, well, that's our plan after retirement and everything. And I was like, well, I feel like it's gonna be sooner. So this was in like the fall of 2019. And they were considering a property. I said, yes, you should buy it. And I said, in about March, I think your husband's going to be, in about 6 months, in March, your husband's going to be able to work from home. Well, he worked for a major movie and television studio. And then I said, and then it looks like next summer you'll be able to move out. So that would be March of 2020 and summer of 2020. Well, my client told her husband, you're going to be able to work from home. And he's like, there's no way I'm going to be able to work from home. Well, then came the pandemic and everyone's working from home. And then they decided to expedite their timeline for moving to the summer of this past year. So that's an example of like, I knew for them, like this is what I first saw happening for them. And I knew there was something coming, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And then I have another client, Mark Gober, who you can also reference because he's a public figure and he's also talked about this. He heard me on a podcast, listened to all my podcasts, booked a session. In that session, I said, you're going to work in spirituality somehow, you're going to write a book, and eventually that's become your work. And he was a Silicon Valley partner in a tech firm. So the Princeton cum laude graduate, like not woo-woo, not into this stuff at all. Well, a year later, he wrote the book. A year later, it's a bestseller. And then last summer, he just released his second book, and he had quit his job in Silicon Valley to focus on all this full time. So, and he references me in his work, so you can check him out, check out his books. These are a couple of examples that I can talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, I plugged his name. You said Mark Gober.
Yeah, he would be a great guest for you. Let me know if you want me to introduce. But yeah.
Yeah, I may have you do that. I plugged his name in so I can look him up and kind of research him. Excuse me.
Fascinating guy, because he does something that it's just not my area of focus, but he looks into the scientific aspect of consciousness. So where does consciousness reside? Like, how do we track or understand consciousness, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, that is. I will look him up and, be in touch with you. I'm always looking for good guests, so I really appreciate that.
Sure.
I think I got 2 more questions for you, and then I'll let you kind of,
Sure.
say some final things, and then we can cut you loose. So I certainly don't want to look for freebies, and I know I'm not a client of yours, but is there any one individual thing that you could tell me about myself, perhaps, whether that's short or in depth?
Well, I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for, but I'm just getting to say that you're a lot more powerful than you think that you are. And it's important for you to just step forward. They do show me the microphone. I know you're obviously a podcaster, but they show me that you're here to reach a lot of people. So it's important for you to understand that, own that, and really step forward and know that what you're here to do is important.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm also getting you're quite telepathic, and that means that you just get information through your thoughts. So a lot of people tend to think that their thoughts are created just by them, when actually from a psychic perspective, a lot of times your thoughts are like, they're what you're thinking, they're what your angels are telling you, they're what your neighbor is thinking, there's that spirit over there. It's like a combination of a lot of different things. And so your thoughts could be almost like a psychic conversation that you're hearing as well as a part of. So just something to consider, that your thoughts may not just be originating from you.
Okay. That's very interesting as well. Thank you. I appreciate that. So
You're welcome.
I ask all my guests this. So give me 1 to 2 songs that you are currently popular on or listening to, or kind of get you pumped up and get you going.
Well, so I love the song Journey. Don't Stop Believing. That's always, important. It's just the message. Yeah, the message of the song, the message of the band. If you haven't checked out the documentary about the Filipino singer who suddenly was like the lead singer of Journey after like being almost homeless in the Philippines, like it's a really crazy story. I love that one. And then another song that pops up a lot of time is Send Me an Angel. So I believe we get messages through music. So if a song comes up and there's a message or the title of the song means something, pay attention to that. A lot of times it's our angels communicating with us.
Okay. Thank you. Like I said, I started asking all my guests that, and I typically download those songs onto a playlist and kind of keep those in the.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's kind of cool to reference back on, and it's kind of neat to just to see what people are listening to. It kind of, like you said, it kind of can describe someone, or, some people's songs surprise me. So
in this case, I think that for this conversation, I have very eclectic music taste. I like all kinds, but for this question, those felt like psychically like the ones to mention.
Good deal. Laura, we are right at our time limit. You've been an amazing guest. I really appreciate it. You seem extremely intelligent and you're very easy to talk to. I think you are really good at what you do. You send good vibes, and like I said, it's been great, and I really appreciate you coming on. And I'm glad that we connected online, and maybe that happened for a reason. But
I believe there are no accidents. Like if I just feel to reach out, I do. So yeah, it feels like it's important, and yeah, it's really a pleasure. I love the topic of your show, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, and feel free to tell the listeners where they can find you, and like I said, I'll include those links in the show as well. But tell us where we can find you, and then maybe what you got planned for the rest of 2021.
Sure. So my website is healingpowers.net, and I'm also on the social media platforms, Twitter at @LauraPowers, Instagram at LauraPowers44, and on Facebook at Healing Powers. My books are on Amazon and all the major book platforms. And email address if people want to connect with me is bookings@laurapowers.net. And yeah, I offer all different kinds of classes on psychic development, training, manifesting. So if any of these things are of interest to you, please feel free to reach out or check out the services page of my website.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, Laura Powers, thank you very much.